Welcome to this November meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Board. We are here and have a quorum. There will be 3 members of the board here today, plus quite a few staff members. Great that you're all here. We have a full agenda, so let's just get to it. The first item is approval of minutes. John sent around 3 minutes for consideration. Do I hear any requests to amend the minutes? Can I see a request, a motion to approve the minutes for September and October?
Yeah, let me look up the dates real quick. All right.
September 6th and October 9th.
September. Yes. I should put on my glasses. It's small. I move that we approve the minutes for September 6th and October
9th.
9th.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So the minutes are approved. The next item is the chair's report, and I only want to talk about one thing. We had in our packet a letter that we received from many of the folks in the town who have ETS heating systems, asking questions about the ETS rate and making the case for why there should continue to be a special rate for ETS. I want to say how I think about this topic, and am recommending that we not take any action at the moment. I think when it comes to any special changes to any special rates after today, we should wait until we have our time of use rate basic system established and know what the rates are going to be in terms of the time of use rates for most residents. We can then understand what the implication of those rates are for groups of ratepayers who are currently on special rates. So I recommend we not take up this ETS issue until basically next summer, when we have a sense of what's happening with the ETS rates. I know there had been some discussion as whether there should be a change in that rate for the year 2025. I just don't think we should be talking about any additional short-term changes at the moment. Just live with what we have and then address the topic when it comes to consideration of the whole time of use rate system. That's my report. I don't know if there are any questions or comments.
I would just agree with you that ETS should be addressed after we have time of use established. I think Hal knows my views on ETS, that they should be paying the off-peak rate, and that will change when we make a new time of use. So I think it shouldn't change yet, but it should get closer and closer to that off-peak pricing.
I am agnostic as to whether we should go in that direction that you're recommending, but my sense is it's hard for me to evaluate that until we know what the off-peak rate is going to be. Then we know what the implications for the ETS customers would be of going to putting them on the regular off-peak rate, and whether that would represent a burden or not a burden.
I think it needs an in-depth discussion by the board and
Yes.
time on the agenda.
Yes, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is the director's report.
Hello, everyone. Hold my screen. So I have several updates today. I wanted to let everybody know that on Wednesday, November 6th, the Financial Audit Advisory Committee met. And we had an in-person and virtual meeting at the townhouse. I think Bianca was unable to attend, but we did have the rest of the committee in attendance, as well as the CFO and our auditor from our principal auditor and partner from Markham, and that formerly of Melanson and Heath, as well as the person who conducted all the site visits and oversaw those. And I'm happy to report that it was a clean bill of health. There were no issues found. There were no recommendations. In the past, they wouldn't even create a management letter because they didn't have any findings, but we've asked them to say like, hey, if there's nothing, just say there's nothing because we want a document, So they did have a document. They outlined all their findings and Scott reviewed those with the group. They asked questions. It's helpful that Wendy was there and she has so much background with the light board and light plant. So she was able to ask really good questions and had a good discussion. The committee voted to accept the audit as it was presented. They will now do a report on that and then vote the report, and that will close the review of the audit for CMLP. We're actually getting ready to do inventory again, probably the first week of December, and they will be on site as well for that. They do a review of the audit of the inventory process, and we'll do spot checks of various items and confirm quantities that we find. And then once we have caught up and have closed December, we will have them back out probably in the spring of next year to start the cycle all over again. So I'm happy that that completed without any issues. On October 24th, I just wanted to mention this, the Massachusetts Light Commissioners Association held a discussion on network geothermal. This is a topic that I think we might have discussed before. I've certainly reached out to the group about it, and there's some discussion over at the Climate Action Committee and a new subcommittee that's been created to talk about this particular issue. And so I think I just saw Eric in the waiting room. It was a great presentation. There was an individual there from a public power entity in Oklahoma where they're giving pretty aggressive geothermal rebates and found that it is having dramatic savings on their transmission costs for all customers. And it's been a self-sustaining program for several years. I actually connected with that individual on LinkedIn and have had a couple correspondences with him. But I think that Massachusetts is moving in this direction, so it's an interesting topic to keep an eye on. I think that we're going to see how the financial piece plays out, but things are definitely going in that direction. It's our territory will be interesting because we have a different gas company than the electric company, so rolling it out to be town-wide where we actually use old gas mains to bring that warm water from place to place may work differently in Concord, at least initially, but still, it's something to keep an eye on and consider the implications for our light plant. The state Senate has passed the act for the clean energy and for grid reliability. So now that's moving on to the House, and then also the new economic development package is also moving there. And we heard from our E&E Strategies contact, Vin, that they are moving forward and expect a passage of both in the near future, and then they would go to the governor's desk for signature. And those would have implications, especially the first one on transmission projects and several other things relating to our industry. So I did send out a summary before to the board, but we'll keep an eye on that, how it impacts us. Since Eric is here now, I'll mention that we are planning another sustainability roundtable in December. I believe it's on December 11th, same day we have a light board meeting. In the evening, it'll also be at the Goodwin Forum at the library. And I think CMLP will play a bigger part in this presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we have undertaken and discuss kind of our achievements related to the Climate Action Plan and then what we are continuing to do. And have a discussion on that, and also on some new ESCO contracts, which are kind of town-wide facility studies and maintenance contracts where we'd hire a vendor and that vendor would get performance pay based on how much energy we actually reduce. So that's exciting that that project is going on, that we can have a chance to talk about it. It will be in person and perhaps hybrid. I know that's a great hybrid space. Let's see, we did choose a contractor for the construction of the RFP for the battery storage project, both at the middle school and any future battery development projects. We had interviewed a few and got quotes from several and are really excited about the team that we're working with. They're called Fractal. They're out of Texas. They have a lot of experience with these projects and have already done a tremendous amount of work. We have a meeting today to review the progress that they've made, and they've already got a draft document ready to go for that project. And the solar is expected to go up first, and I'll get to that in a second, but the battery contractor helping us with this IFB or RFP has proved extremely helpful because this is just an area of expertise that we don't have, and this company has a lot of it. We had a meeting last week with Aegis, our excess liability insurer. They had done a presentation at a PERMA conference that Laura was at on loss control related to battery storage, or energy grid scale energy storage. And it was just a fantastic presentation. And Laura thought it would be a great opportunity to bring together a lot of stakeholders for the middle school project to make sure that we're aligned. We've been having a lot of conversations with the fire department, and it's been historically kind of a chicken or egg thing because we want them to tell us what makes them feel good, and they want us to give them a specific project so they can vet it with the state fire marshal's office. And so this was a great opening opportunity to say, these are the guidance and the best practices in terms of reducing potential exposure or liability for some of these projects. We reviewed a lot of failures that have happened. We were briefed on the fact that the rate of failure seems to be steady despite more and more of these units coming online, which suggests that they're getting much safer and that the practices that are being employed to prevent issues that have happened in the past are very effective at doing that. So that's great. But, the battery is expected to go somewhere between 50 and 75 feet from the side of the gymnasium of this school building. So we want to make sure that whatever we do, we take extraordinary measures to ensure the safety of all the people in the building and anybody who might have to service or repair the battery, and that we don't have any failure, any complications. I did reach out to the superintendent. We've got a meeting scheduled for next week to kind of go over some of this. They were unable to come to that meeting, though they were invited. And we'll continue that conversation to make sure that we address as many issues as we can so that people feel very comfortable with this project. There's not a lot of room on that property. So if we do in fact build that much solar, we've got to site a battery there somewhere. So PLM is finalizing their report on the limitations of how much solar we can have at the landfill. So we had asked them to study that. We think the expanded solar will be okay. We're more concerned about how much power can be pushed back out of that facility at one time. And then if they're citing a battery for peak avoidance, how much can that push back during the peak load? So we're really looking at conductor size and power protection devices and relays there to make sure that it can accommodate a certain amount of power. And then we've already asked for kind of a level of curtailment through the battery at that site, but we want to know exactly how much we can go to. And a little piece of that will also be the load that can be taken up in that area. So we're doing studies on that. The second complete draft of the middle school solar and switchboard RFP went back to council, and they returned it back to us with answers to our questions. So we'll meet and discuss those, and we're waiting for some specifications on the switchboard from SDA. And at that point, we should be ready to release the RFP for the solar and the canopies. It's very complicated how we had to do this because of the potential for domestic content reduction in penalty or actual extra benefit. So there are several alternates because the rooftop is one piece, the canopies are a different piece, and then there's alternates with each one for domestic content requirements. And that way we'll be able to make a determination and say, well, if the domestic content costs X% more, but yet we're going to get this % credit, then overall that's a lower project cost. So we will have to choose the lowest bid, but the lowest bid with that criteria in mind. And a lot of coordination between Baker Tilly, council, and our internal staff to kind of figure all that out, but we're very close. We've got 7,137 residential meters installed, or approximately when I made that update. And we've got over 370 commercial meters installed. Those are going pretty well. We sometimes get very lucky in terms of some meters, when you pull them, it doesn't lose electricity because there's continuity, and others there is. So some days we get a lot, some days it's a smaller number. We have to coordinate with the businesses, but Hercules, our contractor, and our staff are doing a great job tracking that and getting those into Yukon. The level 3 chargers at the ride out are complete. I thank Joe for his diligence in getting that done and the pavement fixed. It looks great. There's striping now that signify their EV spots. There's nice area in the middle in case there's a vehicle that requires extra space. There's a sign that says EV only with the mention of the $25 penalty if you're not an EV parked there and charging. And we were able to satisfy all the requirements of the grant, and we've closed out that, and we expect a check from them for about $100,000 in the very near future. So that's excellent. And I really appreciate Joe, the engineering team, but also all the folks who have been testing those units with us. We've had a lot of issues, but the most recent one was that the screen was in French. So we have all these bizarre things that happen, but everybody does a good job at following up to make sure that they're working. The customer service, and Carol specifically, are helping with an employee survey. We did a customer service and experience survey earlier where we had over 1,000 customers in Concord get back to us, but we're actually going to do this now internally with staff. Great Blue, the same company we worked with, has a lot of experience doing this, and I thought it would be a great opportunity with kind of a change of administration to just take a snapshot of where we are and look at where things need to go, and then how effective certain things will be in the future at improving, morale and positivity in the workplace. So I'm excited about that. And then finally, I'll just mention that CMLP met with Minuteman ARC. They plan to electrify their fleet of some 50 vehicles, and their headquarters is on Forest Ridge Road. So it's very exciting to think about, and also they were getting us involved super early, which we are so appreciative of. As you guys know, the lead times on some of this infrastructure, like transformers, can be years. So sometimes people call us with their final plan ready to break ground, and then we need to get a transformer that may take a year or two. So they're very early in the process, and they're also very open to just making something that will work well and that can work, relatively quickly. So having that flexibility and engaging early has been just very appreciated by our staff, and we'll do whatever we can to support them. And they're all currently internal combustion engines, and so this would be a pretty huge project. And there's a lot of math and figuring that has to go into what their needs are for transportation and what their requirements will be for charging, and level 3, level 2, and how many will be running simultaneously. So we'll probably have to assist them. It's nice that it's so close to a substation because we've either got the power or it shouldn't be too hard to get it there. But they're very flexible and they're open to anything. So if we max out our requirements, they can go over the town line and get power from somewhere else, but we'd rather not have to do that. So I'll pause there and turn it back to Warren.
Thank you. This certainly is a lot going on, and there's been a lot of progress even in the last month. Any questions or comments for Jason?
Jason, when do you think, I know we're like 95 to 98% of the smart meters are in. Those, the last 130 residential ones and the last 300 or the last 500 meters, do you think the next meeting that we have in a month, those will be completed, or do you foresee some, the last few being the most difficult or anything?
I do think they'll take a little bit longer. My metrics, our average meters installed per day of working is about 31. And I'm showing that we have 1,400 left to install. That includes all the commercial meters. So this shows an estimated completion date of February 10th for all meters if they continue at that schedule. The residential ones are obviously mostly outside. The commercial ones are often inside, or depends on the size of the structure. But it's going to be weather dependent a little bit. And then also, again, those commercials tend to we do fewer in a day because we are sometimes showing up and they say, well, if I turn this off, you're going to break my $2 million HVAC system. So you need to come back at a time where we can schedule that. So, it's just, they're working, they have clearance to work as much as they possibly can. So I'm hopeful that it will be completed by that early February date, but it's hard to say. I think the last residential meters that I'm seeing, like 80-ish left, are either difficult ones we need to coordinate, there's problems with them, or they might take a slightly different meter. But we do have everything we need in stock. It's just a matter of kind of getting it out there. So I think those will be wrapped up pretty soon by the end of the year for sure.
Excellent. And the level 3 being completed, I can't wait to get that check. It's been a hard road to meet all their needs. And it's great that that's up and running. Right now it still has the CHAdeMO and the CCS cords on each. And when will the 1-year time frame on the grant be up where we can start work on switching out one of those to the NACS connector?
Well, I have great news on that. The state has recognized that this is a problem, that when they solidified the grant requirements probably a few years ago, that plug made sense, but that it doesn't anymore. And so they've actually updated the grant to say that people can apply to change out some of these plugs. So we were waiting to get the grant check back and kind of fulfill that. But now that we're at that phase, we're going to do that and at least get one of those to be changed out in the near future. So we don't have a waiting period or have to worry about potentially losing any funding if we do that. So now it's going to have been sanctioned by the state. So that's great.
That is great news. I think I had another. Oh, the Minuteman ARC fleet. If they want to talk to somebody about medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, let me know.
Okay.
I've helped the schools and others. So
John, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a question, Jason, in terms of following up on the Minuteman ARC fleet electrification initiative. Are there any kind of unique rate issues that would flow from that? Recognizing type 2 chargers are kind of the same that many of us have at home. But I'm wondering for type 3, is that going to require there be a, specific rate, or if there can be any issues in terms of kind of customer contribution for connection or
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe Laura, you can chime in, but when we discussed charging rates, it was with a certain mind to, prioritize charging during certain periods of the day, but that's us setting up the charger and they're picking the rate, but this would be a private entity. So they're just going to take whatever electricity they need at any time that they want it. But, the question is, should we, or is there a different rate structure that they're going to be on than their typical general service? Laura, do you have any thoughts?
As Jason mentioned, with regard to the interconnection and the power supply need, they have indicated that they will be very flexible and they want to do what's going to be best and cheapest. So I think what we'll probably do is sort of an iterative process. I mean, right now, as you probably know, John, commercial accounts, including commercial EV chargers, are charged a demand rate. That's pretty high. We do have the new time of use rate for commercial BEVs that you all passed, I believe it was earlier this year or last year. And that calls for a much reduced demand rate. And it's on the new time of use paradigm. In other words, it's not like the residential time of use is right now, where you have 10 hours of on peak and 14 hours of off peak. It has like 3 or 4 hours of on peak, and it's a high price, but then the other hours are very reasonable. So they would be eligible to sign up for that rate. And the demand rate is less than $2 a kW, compared with 8 or 9 for medium and large general service customers. So I think we will be able to get them a rate that doesn't involve high demand charges, through a combination of our new rate, new BEV rate, and sorry, my cat did not want to be on the video. Push the button. Between the new rate and their flexible and not, want to charge all their vehicles between 5 and 6 p.m. at night.
Thank you.
Good. Anything else, John? I just had one thing, Jason, when you were talking about the number of battery failures and battery fires, did you mean the number has been staying constant? You said the rate has been staying
Sorry,
constant.
the number of failures.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
Like one a month or something, but
Yeah,
the number of installations has increased dramatically, which suggests the rate is going down significantly.
good. And I also had one comment as we were talking about EVs. I don't know if any of you noticed, but there was an election recently, and from everything I hear in terms of what's going to happen in Washington, it's lots and lots of uncertainties. But of any of the tax credits, the EV tax credit is the one that seems most vulnerable for repeal. So, Jason, let's go on to the broadband report.
Yes, thank you. So I did talk to Dale about coming to give a broadband update. Unfortunately, we had a broadband issue last night and he was working until after 2 a.m. So did not want him to come here bright and early and give this update. We had a customer ONT that failed, and the ONTs share fiber with other ONTs. These are the devices that are in your homes to provide you with broadband service, and that failed device actually caused havoc on all the other devices because it forgets the timing protocol that it's supposed to wait to speak and let everybody else speak. So that impacted about 22 customers, and it popped up last night. And Dale was assisting our network engineer who was on site at the substation. They resolved it somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. And the customer's ONT will be replaced this morning if it hasn't already. So I appreciate their work and their dedication in seeing it through. Our time for restoration for residential service is 24 hours, and some people might say, well, let's just wait until the morning, but they were adamant that they address this immediately, and that was with my support as well. So we very excitedly have an accepted offer for the senior network engineer. This is an individual that Dale had worked with in the past and is familiar to him, so we're not concerned about the quality or character of the individual, so that's awesome. He's also a Concord resident and also a broadband customer, so to me that's a huge win. He knows the service from the other side, and his name is Ahmed. He'll be starting in 10 days, so all excellent news. We'll be fully filled for broadband for the first time in several years. We just signed a contract with a new internet service provider. If you'll recall, we have 3 today, and this will be our 4th, but we are planning on removing one of the other 3. This new one is at 10 gigs per second, which is what 2 of our others are. But it's also burstable up to 100 gigs per second. And that's huge for us because as we look to replace our equipment and offer faster speeds, it's really important that we don't, in broadband, we have the same peak problems that the electric side does, in that when people come home at the end of the evening, they are putting on their streaming services and using a ton of bandwidth. Now, the historical option was to just pay for way more bandwidth than you needed 90% of the time. This will allow us to just pay a little bit extra for that couple hours that we might need more. So I'm really pleased with Dale's diligence in finding that vendor and working with them to get into Concord and find the path back to our substation. So they have already started the work on that, and we expect probably in January that circuit will be live with that vendor. Then the last thing I just wanted to mention, and this is pretty big, is that we have a few weeks ago, or I say a few months ago, let's say, we discovered there's a splice case on Losbrook Road at the intersection of Conant, where a splice case carrying 288 strands of fiber was not properly secured in its housing, and it left fibers exposed to the light. Now, fibers are very thin glass strands that are encased in layer after layer in a big, thick, UV-resistant outer cable. But inside the case, it's all exposed, which is why the case protects it. But in this case, many fibers have been exposed to sunlight for many years, and they've become very brittle. The concern is that these are going to break with high winds, or by anybody even opening the case could break some of them. So we would like to fix that, but 288 is a lot of strands, you can imagine. So we want to do this as quickly as possible. We're going to bring in a team that will help our internal staff to get this done as fast as possible. We're going to do a maintenance window on November 20th from 8 p.m. until 7 a.m., but we're actually expecting most of the work will start in the middle of the night, probably around midnight to 1 a.m. And hopefully most people will be back up before they wake up in the morning. We will get this out to as many customers as possible. It's definitely going to impact about 220 customers for sure, because those fibers to their houses go through that case. But we're also concerned because one of our ISPs goes through that case as well. We want to look at what the overall system impact will be. We're going to advertise this widely to all customers just so that they're aware of the work that's going on. And we may need to look at having an option to throttle speeds down a little bit just to make sure that everybody has bandwidth. But anything we have to change, we'll communicate to customers. And they're doing an audit today during the day, where they're going to very carefully open up the case and identify all the fibers so they can first get the feeder fibers and then get the ISP fibers spliced first. And also they can label everything so that the work is faster. So the actual time from the fiber being cut to the fiber being spliced and complete will be, say, 5 hours. But that's 5 hours if it's documented. If we waited for this to break in the wind or when somebody opened it, that could be 24 or more hours. So it definitely is a bummer to have an outage, but doing it now before the winter and doing it proactively is, I think, the right move and will result in much lower impact to people and something that they can plan around as opposed to much longer unscheduled outage. So that's my last broadband update.
Any questions or comments?
It's great. The fixing of that is great, but it also makes me think about the electric side and double poles. I know there's a pole at Crosby's Market on Sudbury Road that is a double pole, and I know winter's coming, and if we lose that, it will be quite a lift to fix it, because I think it's stretched. You can see the excess cables. It's quite a mess.
Yeah. Joe, can you speak to that? Because I know we talked about it, and you let me know why that's an issue and still continues to be an issue.
Yeah, no, this one is on our list. What's complicated there is that we have been looking to underground that area for quite some time. So sort of any work we do right now becomes double work. So we've made it as safe as possible so that it won't come down. But if we go and rebuild that, it's sort of, it's taken us away from the undergrounding of that area that we want to do. Now, unfortunately, the underground materials that we need, the switches and so forth, they're long lead time items that we've been working to try and get better lead times on. But that's really the long and short of it. It would sort of be double work. So for now, we've made it as safe as we can.
Okay, that's
So,
logical.
Joe, when you say you've made it as safe as you can, do you have reasonable confidence that it will survive until you're able to get around to the undergrounding?
Under normal circumstances, yes. I mean, it had a direct strike of, something really bad, that would be one thing. But normal circumstances, it's safe enough.
Good, thank you. Well, let's go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the operating forecast. And this is a big item, so let me turn it back to you, Jason.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Tell me if you guys can see this now. Yep. Okay. So first, I just wanted to kind of discuss the overall process that we go through when we develop the operating forecast. This is a huge team effort, and we would not be here without the hard work of Laura and Joe and many, many, many other people. There is direct input from folks. There is actual direct slides and sheets that are built by other people. The finance team has to, close each month and close the year to get this data. There are reports that go into developing this. There are discussions with staff to get input on future projects, on trying to determine when certain things will be able to be completed and what needs we have. So it's a huge collaboration, and the credit really goes to all the folks who helped put all the data into here. This is just me packaging it up and sharing it with you. Several years ago, I believe in 2018, we brought in, we were kind of between our finance managers, and we brought somebody in who had a wealth of Excel experience and developed a very complicated but efficient tool in taking our data from NISC and plopping it into somewhere where you could make sense of it, and it could automatically generate a lot of charts and visual ways to explain the forecast. So that's what we're going to go through today. And I did just want to talk a little bit about our strategy and thinking about this, that the board has seen a few drafts, and I've been trying to update you as to the changes that have been made. They're either correcting errors or been superficial. We didn't go back and change our strategy or approach our thoughts on when certain elements would be completed, but definitely did clean up as we went through it more carefully, and as we also fed it into the cost of service model. But our hope is that if the board is amenable to the budget as presented, or with a modification that's recommended through an amendment to the motion, that we could vote the forecast approved today, so that we can work on the rate presentation for the December 4th meeting. And then at that time, we could vote that. We do have a placeholder on the December 11th date that we kept just in case that we were not able to finish these 3 separate things that need to happen. So if we need to, we have that date, but our goal is to try to get the schedule that I just mentioned. So, and also the last thing I just wanted to say was that please feel free to stop me and ask questions along the way. I think it'll be much easier than if we try to go back and you guys take notes for the entire thing. And last year, when we presented the budget the first time, we kind of went right into a rates presentation. We're not going to give a full rates presentation, but we're going to talk about the implications on rates and the work that's been done so far, and the kind of the estimates that we're seeing and thinking about. So the first slide, which I see the numbers on the bottom got kind of moved over here, shows the combined net income. We're expecting a 1.3 million positive net income for the electric side, and about 300,000 net income positive for broadband. I'm going to use broadband and telecom interchangeably. Historically, and where all this was developed, it was telecom. We've kind of shifted more to broadband, but I'm just going to use those interchangeably. I've also included the page number on the bottom of these slides for where in the budget, full budget book that you can see, or forecast book. This shows the FTEs and the personnel summary, and this is estimated through the end of this year for 24, and then 25 is assuming fully staffed. And the positions that includes, obviously the network engineer, we're hoping to have that filled, and well, it's filled now, but when the person starts in 10 days, so that's in the 2024 data already. And then the other positions we're expecting in 2025 are 2 line workers, and then an admin position that, same as last year, that was planned but had not been fully articulated at the time. And so you can see the breakdown by division, and you can see telecom at 6 now, which shows them fully staffed. So this is the comparative rate of return, and you'll want to focus on the orange line, which is the DPU formula. We have calculated our own rate of return, but DPU mandates certain things are excluded or included. And so there's always a tiny bit of variation between the DPU formula or the other, but the DPU one is mandated to be below 8%. And typically we target around 2 to 3%. And you'll see here that 2025 is forecasted to be about 1.8%. And 2024, we're expecting will end roughly a little over 3%, 3.1%. So here we've got, sorry, John.
Jason, there's a question from John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you could go back to the previous slide prior to this. I just, in looking at the numbers in terms of the line crew I just noticed that from 23 to 24, there was a pretty marked increase. And it looked like that was attributable to overtime, which I totally understand, happens, right? It's kind of based on kind of system conditions and staffing. You might have significant requirements for overtime in 2024. But what surprised me was that there was an assumption of equivalent high levels of overtime in 2025 in the forecast, when I would expect that, you'd be able to, staff up if you anticipated that level of overtime. And maybe it's a case of you can't staff up because you've had issues in terms of hiring folks. So was just trying to kind of better understand what was happening in terms of that specific line item.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the 2024 estimate may include things like mutual aid that will actually come out because they're reimbursed later. There was a market adjustments that happened this year. As you'll remember, we discussed earlier in the year that accounts for a little bit of that, but the rest is just estimated for the end of the year. The forecasted rate is, applying the same formula across all buckets. And since that's a bigger bucket, it goes up by that amount. But I would expect that number is going to be much lower than that. Number one, we're not going to have all those line workers start on January 1st. And number two, I think you're right that there's probably a bit of an anomaly there with the level of standby overtime and mutual aid. And again, the mutual aid is always reimbursed at 100%. So we incur the cost up front to pay the people, but then the money comes back later. So I don't know if we've gotten the money back from the South Carolina trip, but that was tens of thousands of dollars, with all the costs in. So each of those instances, and we did mutual aid several times this year, earlier in the winter. So, but yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
And
So maybe just to frame it in another term, so that the 2025 value is reflects the fact that there's kind of a consistent assumption that's made to escalate the 2025 values from the 2024 values. And there wasn't an explicit adjustment that was made to reflect the fact that in 2024, there was probably kind of some anomaly in terms of why overtime was so high. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I wanted to ask one question related to this. There were market adjustments to salaries. Does that make us, strongly more competitive in the market for hiring for these positions? I know that this has been an issue in the past where we have put up positions and they sat there for quite a while because the IOUs for the same position were offering quite more. And then if we hired people at market rate, people here would then get upset about pay rate. So where would you say we are in balancing that growth in rates?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of factors here. Number one, fewer people getting into the industry with a smaller pool. Number two, the IOUs, we cannot compete both on salary and also earning potential, and also just on the variability of the work that you do. We require our people to be able to do substation work, underground work, overhead work. And in an IOU, those would be specialized into three separate groups, but also even within that, specialization at a higher level. So you end up becoming kind of an expert in your job in a very small subset. We require people to be experts in many, many things. So they look at it and they think, well, I got a big organization over here paying a bunch, more opportunities for, mutual aid or other support requests where you can make more money. And then also not having as many demands. It's just harder to recruit against that. And with there being a shortage of people, they're going to flock toward those areas first, right? So I think that problem now, I think that we definitely made improvements with the rate of pay, and hopefully it lessens the potential impact of bringing in somebody at a level that would be higher than our existing folks who spent a lot of time and put a lot of effort into building our program here. But the proof is in the pudding. I mean, when we hire the people, then it will show that we're at the right place. So I think that we go through waves of recruitment, both in terms of effort and just staff when they see it. It's still posted and we still get applicants, but there's more of a trickle at this point than it is kind of a steady stream of people. So I think we've made progress, but I think that my goal, and I think Carrie's goal, is that we have a regular review against market of all these positions to make sure that we are competitive. And many other MLPs have policies where every year, every other year, they go through some sort of market research to make sure and peg themselves at a point where all the other MLPs are, just to maintain that competitiveness.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any questions on the rate of return before I move on to sales?
It's not negative, so I'm happy.
So here's the sales volume. I'm not into power yet, so I'll keep this going for a bit and turn it over to Laura when we get to power supply a bit. But this is hard because weather impacts this. So we're looking at weather fluctuations, and we're also looking at load growth or load subtraction. So we are expecting load growth this year of about 4% for the first time in a while, even that's weather adjusted. And we always kind of forecast a normal year. It's hard to do anything else, but we've had a couple lower temperature years in a row. So you'll see in a few slides when we look at the degree days, you'll see it looks higher in 2025, and that's not that we're forecasting an abnormally warm year per se. It's just that we're forecasting kind of an average year, and we've had a couple cooler years. Next, we're going to get into the revenue summary, and I've highlighted, I don't know if the arrow pops up. No, it doesn't. Okay. I've highlighted this operating revenue just to show that, revenue is expected to increase, and part of that is the electricity sales. A big part of that is the electricity sales expected to go up with a higher load. So here we have other revenues, and I'll just point out that the interest rates and the amount of money that's on hand had increased a couple of years ago. So we're expecting those kind of higher interest rates to continue. The treasurer the town treasurer maintains all of CMLP's funds and investments and cash. So they report these numbers out, and they continue to look strong. But we are seeing a little bit of a change in that. So we've forecasted to go down just a little bit from last year, but still considerably higher than where it was several years ago. So here's where I was referring to those, the weather there is the degree days is the purple line. And then you can see the PPA solar behind the meter solar and the RTLO, which last year there was a question on this. What does RTLO stand for? It's real-time load obligation. And so that's the amount of power that we're importing from the market that's not provided in the behind the meter solar that we have PPA for. Laura, did you want to say anything else on this slide?
Not there are.
Okay. Question 2. So this is the purchase power expenditure by cost category. So you can see costs decreasing slightly, and then fixed costs going up 1%, and the RECs shrinking. So why are the RECs shrinking? We need to buy fewer RECs because the nuclear in our portfolio has grown a little bit, and you'll see that in a future slide. When we buy more non-emitting power, we have to buy fewer RECs to offset. And you'll see later when we talk about RECs, we're anticipating collecting far fewer RECs and lowering that 2-cent charge of RECs per kilowatt. The fixed costs are comprised of ancillary, about $760K, and E&E admin fees. That was a question last year. The Watson, like peaker plants, those things, those end up in capacity in the pink area, not in the fixed costs. And in the budget document itself, that's also in the packet, there's a narrative on this section that kind of outlines specifically what each of these buckets are, and in great detail. So thank you, Laura, for anticipating people's questions about what these things add up to. Any questions on this slide?
No, thank you, Laura. It's very helpful.
So this is the purchase power volume by resource type, just to kind of show everybody where we are and where we anticipate being. You'll see market dropping 26%, And you'll see that that nuclear, that pink at the top has increased, and that really explains why we need to buy fewer RECs. The wind is also increased a little bit, and the solar is pretty steady at 6%. There was a question last year about hedged versus open positions. You can see here that 26% is market. Winter can be very volatile. We've had a few years ago where prices spiked dramatically. We were just talking to MWEC about this. They offer power portfolio services similar to E&E, and they provided us some very interesting information about the kind of philosophical nature of hedging versus open positions in power supply, and how some places have a very wide tolerance and some places have a very narrow tolerance. We typically like to stay between 10 and 20% for that winter period or the volatile periods. And this winter, we've done some purchases at fixed prices so that 26% will be around 10% this winter, so that we won't be as exposed as we could if we didn't purchase that. So any questions? Oh,
I
sure.
can clarify that this is a breakout of volume by resource type, not a breakout by hedge versus unhedged.
Right.
Just because something falls in the gray area doesn't mean it was unhedged. It's not like we had 57% open in 2021. When we make forward purchases and hedges in the bilateral market, like if we buy from Shell or Morgan Stanley, those end up as being market because they're not coming from a specific resource, but yet they were hedged. So I just don't want to give people the impression that these big market numbers were all unhedged positions.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. So this just shows the non-carbon emitting electricity purchases and the type of certificate received or retired. And you'll see the class 1 RECs down there in the blue, and then Maine, Vermont, the nuclear, and then the emitting, and then what we've purchased to offset. I know it looks like the RECs don't add up to 100%, but we always make sure that they do. And since I'm talking about the future years. And since 2023, we have been 100% non-emitting through either power purchases or renewable energy credits.
The reason that those RECs don't go to 100% is because this is a chart of percentages of purchases. And our obligation is to meet 100% of sales. And sales are always less than purchases. So to meet 100% of sales, which might be 165 million kilowatt hours, we're buying 170 million. So this is a percent of the 170 million. So it's 100% of sales, but it's not 100% of purchases.
Thank you, Laura. That clarified the 2023 additions.
If I can just ask a question in terms of the relative proportion of Maine Class 2 and Vermont Tier 1. It looks like the Vermont Tier 1 is relatively stable. Is that because it's associated with a long-term contract? And trying to understand why the Maine Class 2 jumps around, and recognizing that that's probably a lower cost REC from, I believe, existing renewable resources. What's the rationale there in terms of how that number changes?
So the Vermont Tier 1 is our long-term NYPA contract. It's our entitlement share of that resource through, the 50-year relicense of the resource. So that's why it remains very, very steady. It does, it's hydro, so it can vary a little bit, year by year in terms of the kilowatt hours that are produced. But our share of it is relatively constant, and that is a long-term contract. The green varies for two reasons. One, it does have variability in the output based on hydrology, but we are also making changes in our commitments. So you can see in 2023, there was a big jump from 2022 from 7 to 17%. That's because we had new contracts come online that were for existing hydro resources, like in Western Mass. And so that's why there was that big variability there. You can see that contract actually come off the books in 2029 when the forecasted variability, it going from 18 to 13. So there's really two factors there. The one that contributes to the larger variability is the change in forward commitments for the resources.
Okay, that's Very helpful. So just so I understand it, the main class 2 essentially is recs that are associated with long-term power purchase agreements. But when we go to market to purchase recs, we're purchasing Massachusetts class 1 recs.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Very helpful.
So here we are on O&M. We're expecting kind of a trend of a slight increase. And I have to say, I noticed a couple of the charts got lopped off at the top because the range didn't accommodate them. And I fixed a couple, and this one looks like I missed a little bit, but we'll get to the actual numbers in a second so you can see it in the chart, or the table rather. So here we are, total 9.7 million forecasted, last year 8.3. I wanted to call out specifically this highlighted line with the red arrow, which is the tree trimming line. We kind of plan to do about a quarter of the town every year. For a while, it was a 3 years on, 1 year off plan, and then it was kind of shifted to no, let's just do a quarter every year so that it's more of a steady line as opposed to jumping around that 4th year. This year we did tree trimming, but only kind of emergency or as needed or problem areas, whereas next year we're planning on picking up that portion of 2024 that we didn't do, and also another quarter. So that'll be half of the town. And so that's a pretty big jump, and explains kind of the largest piece of the increase from that 1.029 million to the 1.806 million on the O&M and under distribution here.
And doing half the town in 25, the other half of the town, how old will those trees be? Will we be, because I'm assuming a 4-year cycle of growth and then trim. Are we going to see 26 being a lot less because we did the other half recently, or are we going to see other half done because we really put a lot off?
Right. We did a big portion in 2023. Rates also went up because at that time we had to shift to paying prevailing wage for tree trimming, whereas we hadn't in the past. So the actual cost of it went up too. But we did a big chunk in 2023. We do a big chunk in 2025. I think we're going to go back to our regular quarter of the town the following year. We're not going to need to do another big chunk. So that's our expectation. So that would drop by half next year in 26.
And Jason, what's the story with maintenance of street lights? That went up significantly this year, and you're suggesting it's going to go up significantly again next year.
Yeah, we actually plan to replace some additional streetlights in the West Concord and downtown areas. We're not doing the full rehaul that's needed, but there is some added cost there associated with that. And we do continue to see, we still have the old halide streetlights in some places. And so we're going to make sure that we get some of those to LED if possible.
And the fixtures that had the clasp release, those have all been dealt with. Is that what we're replacing?
No, those are, I mean, so the streetlights are something, is it Joe, like $12,000 to $14,000 a piece for one light? So 60,000 is not really that many streetlights here. It's really just a small number for the decorative ones. The traditional streetlights or something affixed to a existing utility pole obviously is much, much cheaper. Any other questions on this? So I'll point out here, CARES. I have to admit, I just learned what the acronym CARES stood for the other day. I have seen it a million times and just knew it meant energy management, but it was the Conservation and Renewable Energy Services. So these are our heat pump, EV, energy efficiency, and other popular rebates and programs. We're going to get into a pretty specific list of these and what's anticipated. Jan and her team and Laura do a great job kind of forecasting out based on our original estimate, our year to date, and our projected for the current year to have an idea of what's going to happen in the following year. So again, we have a whole slide dedicated to this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's the lion's share of the customer accounts bucket.
And my understanding is the CARES funding we collect 0.5% on bills to fund CARES, but that doesn't fully fund that line item because we have a lot of rebates and programs. Does it make sense to continue to use the CARES designation in this expense, or to put it into just normal operational activities? We talked about this before, where if we try to say that CARES expenses are funded through that 0.5% on bills, it hasn't worked for the last, I don't know, 8 years. So should we really be looking at it that way, or should we define it as just a core thing that we do in our business and call it rebates
So-
and
Brian, we do no longer charge that 0.62% on bills.
oh,
We went ahead based on a board vote, I don't remember which year, to go ahead and fold those expenses into our regular O&M budget. And it's just part of providing service. The remnant of sort of the way we account for things and forecast internally made just this line item easy to put in here. We could easily, instead of calling it CARES expenses and then breaking out on a future slide, we could just embed all the individual, line items within this on this page, but it just seems easier to sum it up here, and then we'll break it out for you in a little bit.
Thank you. What I was remembering was that past discussion. It sounds like we did take action, we didn't push it off. And it's just a legacy label. I'm not requesting any change then. I think it's makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
A question on the customer service and informational in terms of dramatic jump in 2024. What's that attributable to? And it's obviously it's carried forward in terms of 2025, which I'm assuming was just essentially an escalation applied to the 2024 number.
Right. Let me see if I can pull that up for you. That's under customer accounts. Service and informational. I'm probably going to have to look at a report to see what's hit that line to determine what's comprised of it, since I don't think Carol is on the call and could answer that. If Laura or Joe knows the answer to that question, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see if I can get the answer to you before the end of the meeting, or can follow up for sure.
Great.
So the next slide, we have administrative and general salaries that's highlighted in employee pension and benefits. So the town has a classification and compensation plan that's voted at town meeting that is usually implemented around July 1st of each year. This was the first year that we kind of changed the way that we did that, and from recent years, there is now within every grade, there are 18 steps. Each step is 2% higher than the previous amount, starting at the base. So the expectation is that an employee's salary would go up by that base 2%, and then there is on top of that a merit payment. The merit payment, it can be fixed, it can be variable depending on the performance of the employee, but also the total percentage that's offered may change depending on budget or other factors. So that's kind of what the plan was this year and what we're expecting it will be next year. And this is discussed at personnel board meetings and at the select board. So they're trying to put together a plan where people have predictable rate increases, and it also helps when doing forecasting. So that's the compensation plan. I mentioned the merit and or the market and equity adjustments that happened earlier this year. And we'll revisit, salaries on a routine basis going forward, doing our own kind of CMLP classification study just to look at other MLPs. I wanted to mention that in terms of salaries, the last year, when we did the budget presentation, Matt pointed out that even though when you looked at the number of FTEs we anticipated under the personnel slide and page in the budget or the forecast book, we didn't actually forecast all of those positions to be filled. And that seemed kind of strange to me, like, oh, we have all these positions, we're going to fill them, but we're not actually going to forecast to pay them. If we think we're going to fill the positions, we should forecast it. So I did include all the positions in here, which is another reason for the increase, but also not necessarily for 12 months of the year, right? I don't think if we don't have any super qualified people in the pipeline today that we're going to have all three of these positions start January 1st. So they're kind of prorated, but they're all built into this forecast, which hadn't been done in the past. The employee pension and benefits does include our actual pension costs. We receive, invoices every month from the Concord pension system that we pay for retirees, but it also includes benefits for our employees here at Sanofi. Any questions on this slide? All right. So here we are in that breakdown of energy management or CARES. So this is their anticipated total services of that 1.229 million all the way at the bottom of that slide. So I'll just highlight a few things first, just to say that the air source heat pump rebates are definitely the big draw here and where the lion's share of the money is going. For these columns, let me just explain kind of what you're looking at. The first column is the 2024 forecast from our forecast last year. And then when we ran the reports in October, you'll see the next column, which is, wave my arm here, 1021, when we ran those reports. And then you'll see if that number continues through the end of the year, and that's what the 2024 projection is. And then the next column is the difference between kind of where we are and where we thought we were going to be, so you can see what's trending up or down. And then you'll see the last column, which is what the forecast is suggesting for the following year based on that data, and also the intimate knowledge that Jan, Pamela, and Laura and our heat pump coaches have on the success of these programs. So that's how we get to this. We also have the Drive EV rebate program, which is quite popular. And then last year we pointed out that we have this JOT form that originally was forecasted to be $300. We did know that it was going to jump the following year or last year, but at the time we didn't have the paperwork in. So it came in at that or a little over $9,000. We expect it to be about 10,000 as we add a couple of additional users to be in there. That became necessary when we stopped outsourcing our rebate processing or our assistance from Abode. They kind of got out of that market. We brought our heat pump coaches in-house, and we spun up this application to use to track those applications and the people who are interested in the coaching that we give. And kudos to Jan for getting that whole program spun up in JOT form in such short order. But that's what that JOT form rebate application line is. The EV promotion and education line, which I didn't highlight, but you'll see it a couple above the Drive EV rebate program. There was a question last year, like what exactly is that? That is the Energy New England EV coaches that we pay for, as well as any public outreach events like the Concord Drives Electric or the EV showcase that we just did, the ancillary costs associated with putting on events like that. So that's what that line is. Any other questions on this slide?
In general, it looks like the 2024 estimated versus forecast are all short. Are these programs kind of waning in their excitement in the community, or is it just last year was a big boom and we haven't adjusted the numbers?
I'll let Laura take a stab. I could say something, but I'll let her first because she would probably have a better idea.
And historically, this group has always been very optimistic and forecasted, big uptake and big plans, right, which is great. But then the reality sinks in. So for at least since 2020, like we've had big aspirations, big expectations, and they usually come in lower. So I don't think 2024 is that much of an aberration. We did try in 2025 to temper our usual optimistic, rosy view of the world. The thing that happened on November 5th might have had something to do with that as well. But anyway, I think the 2025 numbers are a little bit more realistic. I mean, these are estimates. We don't know how many people are gonna buy electric vehicles, right? So I feel pretty comfortable with the 2025 numbers. And I don't think 2024 is an indication that, you know, the number of people interested in these programs are falling off. It's really more of our expectations versus what actually happens.
Great.
All right, we're more than halfway through. All right, so here you'll see the net change in plant value, and you'll see sizable jumps from 22 to 23 and 4, and then a big jump from 24 to 25. So what you're looking at here is in 23 and 4, the advanced metering project, all the equipment and purchasing that went into that, which increases the plant value, and then a dramatic increase in 25 with the middle school solar and battery project. All of those will be assets of the plant, since CMLP will own and operate those, and also receive the benefits of those.
And how does this affect the pilot or reporting with DPU? Does this increase in plant assets affect some of those calculations, or have we changed that methodology?
The pilot is mostly has to do with sales volume, so this should not impact that. The DPU, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm suspecting it's not going to impact that as well. I think that
That's just reporting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say on a separate note that the town is exploring pilot conversations. I don't know if people saw the recent select board meeting on this, but they're exploring conversations about some nonprofits in town that currently don't pay a pilot to see if they can engage those individuals and those entities in contributing to payments in lieu of taxes. All right, so here you'll see the 5-year capital plan, and I just wanted to call out, oh, sorry, the first page of it. I'm looking at the preview for the next slide, and it's always distracting me. Here you're gonna see some substation relays, or transmission plant station relays. And these are going to help with the bidirectional flow that we're expecting. So when we set up the metering domain, which remember is a mechanism by which we can, a legal mechanism by which we can push back power to Eversource past our substation, we also need to physically be able to do that. Currently, our relays and power protection devices are set up to only flow in one direction. And so we need to change the relays so that they're not simple electromechanical relays, but they're actually digital relays that can be programmed to say, if the power is flowing in this direction, then assume it's supposed to flow in that direction. But if power starts to drop off and then gradually flows in the other direction, well, that's okay. But once it starts flowing in the other direction, we'll make sure it continues to flow in that direction. So this will be for the very expensive and large relays that will help us enable the bidirectional flow for power. And then I just wanted to call out on the next slide, we have a lot of different things to mention. First, the solar generation. So that's going to include the solar panels that will be installed in the school. There's actually a little bit more money for that project kind of buried in here. Some of it's for the battery, which you'll see in 3630, which is energy storage equipment. But also some of the other smaller stuff is related to this project as well. We're anticipating the full kind of $7.5 million, but it's going to be distributed among several different lines, including some which will be in O&M. So we have, Carlin, do you want me to finish this slide before your question, or do you want?
The question I have is about this particular slide. So tell me how you want to proceed.
Go ahead now. You can ask it now.
Okay. Thank you, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, trying to get my video on, and speaking on my own behalf, but we're focusing on capital plans. And I was looking at slides 89 and 90, looking at the dollar amounts, because 89 has about 12 million, but 2028 has about 11 million. The timing looks like it's the energy storage equipment. My concern is this, based on the forecast we had from the towns and schools for their operating, we're going to be faced with an override vote in 2028. So if you're coming in with a warrant article for $10 million or $12 million, even if it's from the electric fund, you're going to have some headwinds. And I just want to give you that heads up. I think towns and the schools are trying to change that trajectory, but in 2 years, we're going to be doing the override process, which is not going to be fun. That's it.
And Jason, if I'm correct, that 10.4 million is the article that was passed.
Yep, it's already been authorized, so we won't need to go back to town meeting for authorization, but we will certainly be mindful. You'll see on the next slide is our debt service expected, and you'll see when that load's going to hit. In talking to Scott, our partner at Markham, our auditing firm, we did learn that it's a good idea to make sure that whatever your debt load is can be absorbed by your kind of net income. That's kind of a measure of a healthy business. So, even if that's being accounted for, you don't want to see debt kind of creep beyond that level. And we're anticipating debt, I think in 2028, around 2.5 million a year. It drops off below that. But anyway, so great points. I think that we want to be mindful of the messaging of this. We do expect that the battery will save us a lot of money. We know that that first year was going to be a lift. And we also, the credits are to be determined as well, right? So we want to, when we talk about 2028, we wanted to push this out of 25 because we think the first battery will not be purchased by us, but it may come sooner than that. We have the authorization now. It could be 2025, it could be smaller, it could be different places, but we'll talk more about that as a separate project. We just don't think it's going to happen this particular year in 25.
Jason, given issues in the supply chain, is it realistic to think that we're going to do all this capital spending next year?
I think that, like to Laura's point about energy management, I think we're cautiously optimistic that we can get all of this done. Are we certain? No, but some of these are, the lead time is looking better on some transformers than we were seeing. We were seeing 2 to 3 years. On the big ones, it still is, but on the medium and smaller ones, it's gotten much, much better. So we seem to be beyond the kind of COVID supply chain and goes back to the normal kind of year lead time for some of these. But we've already got RFPs together for some things. We've already got some orders out. So we do think we'll receive a lot of this equipment next year.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just mention a couple other things. The overhead conductors in 3650 in the Strawberry Hill, kind of a Nersnack area. A lot of things need to be replaced over there that are becoming unsafe. Underground conversions, you'll see taking place for areas we already have conduit. That is the 3670 line. The transformers, we're working on 2 large bids for transformers and expecting orders to total about $2 million over the next 2 years. The large underground area that we're looking at is in the Elsinore near Belknap, kind of in the downtown area. And then I think we're going to finish up the Cambridge Turnpike as well. There are some areas of town where we have conduit. We have not yet run the conductors through them, so we'll be putting together kind of an idea and a plan for that. It's not highlighted, but I did just want to point out 3900 general plant structure improvement goes up from 100,000 this year to about $1 million next year. There's a lot of kind of deferred maintenance and things that are going to hit the light plant kind of at the same time, including the parking lot, fuel storage, HVAC, and a roof. So we're kind of anticipating an abnormally large year for a year as we address a lot of those issues. And then transportation equipment, we're planning to replace 3 vehicles with EVs. And then also we have a digger derrick that's going to be replaced, which is a very large vehicle. And down below in power operated equipment, we have a forklift in there. I think I'll pause there. Any other questions on the capital before I get to the debt? All right, I'll jump to the debt. So here you see kind of those pale colors going back to 2016 or the existing debt that we have in place that falls off by 27. The purple color is the advanced metering stuff. We actually got authorization to borrow much, much more, which was 3 million, but we're actually only borrowing about 550,000 or 580,000. And that was due to the fact that we'd already actually spent the money from the depreciation fund, and there had always been uncertainty whether it would be financed from depreciation or from debt. And so we decided to borrow the rest. It's gonna be small over just about 5 years. You'll see there's like a half a year on either side and then 4 full years. The green is the middle school solar and battery, and you'll see that hitting next year. Also, you know, the first debt payment will be a half as well, and then that's going to be expected 10-year. The CFO has advised us to kind of plan for a 4%, and everything's been coming in under that. So that's what the interest rate used, which has come down a few years ago. The projections were all using 5% interest rates. We'll have to see as the Fed continues to raise interest rates what that does to municipal bonds. Any questions on the debt service? I know we kind of talked about it a little bit on the previous slide.
Which of these is the most expensive debt? What's the highest interest rate, the newest?
That's a great question. Do I have the debt information? Let me look at that. I'll make a note of it. What is the debt?
It's just, it is, our debt load is going up. You know, good management of that, whether it be, you know, raise rates a little to start paying these off earlier. I don't know exactly what makes sense, but I'm sure that we'll do other projects in the future that we don't know about yet, and we don't want to have a massive debt load start to spiral. So
Yeah, and a little birdie told me that the newest debt is the most expensive.
okay, that's what I assumed.
All right, so now we're moving on to telecom. So telecom, you'll see here, we're projected to be about 270,000, rounding up to 300 on the bigger documents, but for net income, and we'll get into why. You'll see both revenue and expenses increasing in 25. Here's our revenue by category. You'll see that residential just keeps stepping up year after year. Commercial or business seems relatively flat. Concord is a very residential community, so we're always going to have kind of an outsized residential base, but we do hope to, with our faster services that we are going to be able to offer with our new 10 gig service, that more businesses will be able to partake. We have some really big mission critical businesses that just need more than a gig, and that's all that we can offer today. Our new technology will offer 10 gig symmetrical service, and we do anticipate seeing kind of a modest increase once that comes into play. But we're not forecasting that growth yet for 25, just because we don't know when in the year that project will be done. It could take many months for that to be really complete when we can offer that. And the residential here is about 1.47 million in 25, commercial 264,000. So here you'll see the operating revenue and the sales that we're expecting. The residential service going up by an even percent for the last few years, and the commercial being pretty flat, around 110, 111,000. The residential increase is about 7%, commercial 1%. This is the chart that was in the packet. This is the one that I mentioned that was lopped off, so I actually fixed it. And so here's when I redistributed the axis there, so you can see the rest of it. But I just wanted to show you that the original slide, so that people following along were not confused if it was a different slide. But this just shows the O&M costs and where things are going up, and you'll see that the administrative general costs, mostly due to that salary for the network engineer that's coming on, is going to be there. And you're going to see the breakdown on this next slide. So here we have both the ratios, the total O&M costs, and then down below you'll see things like bandwidth, distribution costs. Our bandwidth is anticipated to go up in 25 as we onboard that fourth ISP. We will offboard an ISP. It's always tricky because we can't just say goodbye when we have static IP addresses that are assigned to customers and equipment that needs to be offloaded. So we try to do that as with as least impact as possible, so that we will transfer existing customers, you know, when it's convenient for them, to a different IP address, so that we can then fully kind of take down that other service, but we anticipate a little bit of extra cost this year. The following year, we actually think it should go down because our 3 contracts are much lower than they are today. So we will save money in that line in the future. I'll pause here. Any questions? Telecom, O&M?
Yeah, one question on telecom is it does seem like you are projecting more revenue than expenses next year, but it seems like the expenses are going up faster than the revenue. Does that bode a problem if that trend continues?
I don't think so because we are, for 2 reasons. First, this year is an anomaly a bit because we're expecting to spend 300,000 on that upgrade for all that equipment. And remember, it's not just upgrading for the sake of upgrading. This equipment's like 13 years old now, so
Yeah.
it badly needs to be replaced anyway, and it was part of our planned depreciation expenses. So, but it is way more than we spend in a typical year. When you see the capital plan, you'll see that this year is an anomaly for that. So next year should be better for that reason, but then also just the penetration that we'll have once we have this new service, and it will actually allow us to put more customers on the same fiber, so we don't need to run additional fiber as much in the future. And we just think that it will also open up the pool to more customers. And we are seeing steady uptake of those faster speeds that we offer now, which is generating more revenue. We're not pushing it and aggressively trying to sell people things they don't need, but there are customers who have legitimate needs for faster speeds, and we're finding that they are appreciating that we offer them now, and it's turning into more revenue. And we also have the new developments. There's 2 big 40B developments that are going in, one on Forest Ridge and one in Baker Ave, hundreds of residences. And because we can get in early on, we can make sure that they're wired and have conduit. And so those could be potentially hundreds of additional customers that we can take on so that we can focus our money and efforts on the existing MDUs that struggle to have availability.
Great, thank you.
So next we'll move into the other costs. For O&M, you'll just see the customer account costs, pretty negligible, and then the administrative and general costs going up, and a large portion of that has to do with those administration and general salaries. Salaries and benefits, definitely the largest drivers of the admin and general costs. I'll pause here too, just to see if there's any questions. All right, the next slide is going to be the capital plan, and you'll see here we have 4 vehicles in broadband. One is pretty undrivable, and then of the 3, one of them has been needed to be replaced for a couple of years now, and so we have the money in here to do that. We call it a van. It's a big van that allows you to splice fiber in the back of it, but also has a big lift on it so that you can get up to a pole. So these are not just like a passenger van, and they're outfitted with all sorts of equipment and things inside of it. So we're expecting to do that this year, as well as that the upgrade to the XGS PON, which I've put in here, is 300,000. It's going to be about 250,000 for the equipment from our hardware vendor, and then about another 50,000 for switching and routing capabilities to allow for up to 100 gig speeds on these lines, which today is only 10. So it's going to be an order of magnitude faster and allow for, we're hopeful that it'll last us at least another 10 years. So when you think about that 300,000 over 10 years, it's definitely a worthwhile investment to keep things stable and allow for faster speeds. Before I move on to telecom debt, any questions here?
So with the vehicles, I know that with the bucket trucks and other things, that in the winter, they do a good job of getting the salt off of the frames. Those trucks can last. I mean, it was a 92 that we just got rid of recently. I mean, they last quite a long time if you manage the rust. Are we doing the same with the telecom vehicles and these specialized vans?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and luckily they're garaged indoors. Unfortunately, we're kind of a spot short for one of our broadband trucks, and so it parks in the inventory area. But we, keeping it indoors and keeping it clean, like you said, makes it last so much longer. And our fleet mechanic and Senior Mechanic Jay Simeone does just a terrific job at maintaining these vehicles and making sure that they're serviced and clean and that their life is extended as much as possible. We get a lot more out of our vehicles than many other MLPs do, so.
Great.
All right, I'll move to telecom debt service. There's 2 slides here. I'm not going to spend as much time on this one because I want to flip over to the other one that's going to show the debt owed to the light plant, which I'll flip to now. So this is the same chart that you'll see over here, just with that blue lines added. The blue lines represent the $1.9 million electric loan that was made to broadband for the initial startup costs of the enterprise. And it's been operating well for when you see the blue lines coming on kind of in 2022, that's been working well. We did anticipate kind of escalation over time just based on estimated revenues for broadband and a positive net income, but we can certainly take a look at that. I know that people in the fiber broadband completion task force were advocating for a much slower payback of this so that broadband could use that money to reinvest in expanding and into capital, into expanding service for more people, which would then generate more revenue, right? So we'll look at that. Right now it's working, but again, we do anticipate the lack of 450,000 of spending for capital the following year in 26. So that might be possible, but there is flexibility here in changing that schedule, and something that the board can definitely talk about and weigh in on too, just about the philosophy on the payback schedule of is 10 years reasonable to aggressive, what makes sense. So, and that is my last slide. So maybe questions on this, and then I can stop sharing and we can have a discussion.
On this particular
Can
slide,
we only take questions that are really crucial at this point? We have limited time left. We're gonna need to postpone other agenda items, but I want to make sure we get to a vote on the operating plan. So, are there any questions that are crucial?
I was just going to agree with that philosophy that we can adjust this debt load to benefit broadband, but I do want it to, I want broadband pushed to get it paid off as well. So I'm glad it's flexible. I have no other comments or questions on the operating forecast.
So Jason, you said you were going to give some suggestions about the implications of this forecast for rates.
Yes. So let me do that very quickly. Typically what's happening while Matt is putting together this forecast is Matt and Laura are working together on the cost of service model. So when Baker Tilly came several years ago and helped us do a cost of service study, they left a model so that every year we could take our revenue requirements and put it into the model and then figure out where it spits out for a recommendation on each of our rate tiers. Laura has helped a lot with the budget, and so she's had far less time to work on the cost of service model, but she has made it through a draft, and so we would like to at least give you an indication of where we are. Yesterday, when we were looking at it, it looked like we needed to collect about $1.7 million in addition to what we collected this year, but there's some variability there because there is some refinement that we can do based on the modeling of the load growth. We don't think the load growth is going to be steady throughout the year, right? It's going to be, it might be variable because if we're seeing load growth due to heat pumps, right, there might be more in the winter. So we're still refining the actual numbers, and then also the overcollection of RECs and the overcollection of rates in general has generated some money that is available to potentially offset any minor increase needs that we're looking at. So, Laura, do you want to speak a little bit more about what you found so far and kind of what we feel comfortable in announcing broadly, and then we can, give further detail at the December meeting?
Yeah, I just want to say that the expectation of a shortfall of about 1.7 or 1.8 million, translates equally to all customers as a rate of about a penny, which is about a 5% increase if you think about it from a residential rate of roughly 20 cents. That 1.8 million shortfall includes setting aside about $1 million for what we call return on rate base. This is money, basically forecasting for net income. And we've had a lot of discussions with the board in the past about why a nonprofit might forecast positive net income. Aren't we just trying to break even? But the consultants will tell you that the purpose of forecasting a return on rate base is twofold. One, it provides funds to pay for debt service. And number two, depreciation is based on historical equipment costs. When we go to actually replace equipment, it's going to be at the current cost. So that return on rate base helps cover the difference between historical cost and current cost, which is essentially inflation. So there's a philosophical reason why even a nonprofit wants to forecast this net income. So I just wanted to bring that up because if the board were to come back and say, you know, it's looking kind of tight this year, we really don't want to forecast for more net income, you know, that could damper what we need to collect by, you know, as much as $1 million. So yeah, I don't have a lot more detail. I don't have a pro forma residential rate for you yet. We're just looking at high level over and under collections. So I think that's about all we want to say at this point.
So
So any questions about the operating plan or about what Laura was just saying about debt?
nope.
Should we take a motion to approve the operating plan? Are folks ready to vote on it?
Is it necessary at this time? Because Bianca isn't here, and she may have opinions.
Yeah, but we do have a quorum. I mean, I guess the issue is that the staff needs some indication as to whether we're basically accepting the operating plan because they need that information to set rates for next year.
I would approve it. I think we're ready. I don't want to hold up the process for anything.
John, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I do want to call out, I feel like there were two pretty significant anomalies in terms of operating expenses, which to me suggests that it's conceivable that the 2025 budget might be overstated. So,
Yeah, I must say I'm not completely comfortable taking action on this without knowing about that very dramatic increase in that consumer education line, without even knowing what that is. That was a lot of money.
Yeah, and I could get you that information with 5 minutes, but I know, Warren, you said you had a hard stop at 9:15 and
Actually, I don't
okay.
any longer, but I mean, maybe what we should do is, you know, if you're comfortable with this, we take the sense of the board that we generally approve the operating plan, and we recommend that you use it for setting rates for next year. But before we take a formal vote, we do want to have that additional information. What's, John, the other anomaly you were concerned about?
The line workers?
yeah, line crew, yep.
Yeah, I made notes of those too.
And the only request I would have is to get a final version of this with the graphs that show everything correctly.
Yeah, in the budget document, they're there. It's just, it was the presentation, the PowerPoint is where they got lopped off, but in your budget book, they show correctly.
Okay.
So, Jason, is this sufficient for your purposes and Laura in terms of working on the rates?
Well, I think the concern is that if we go through the cost of service study as, with this generally accepted, and then we need to change something, then we need to redo the cost of service. So let's say we find that one of these was an error and one of them was not. We change the error. Should we use that figure for the cost of service model and then proceed? Should we?
Yeah, I would think if you find out there was an error in one of those numbers, use the revised number for the cost of service.
And then if there's not an error, just use the number presented.
Right, yes.
I have enough trust to go
Okay.
forward with that.
Laura, does that work for you for the model?
Depends on when we get clarification of the real number.
Well, so that apparently wouldn't happen until December 4th. So,
No, I mean, basically, we're saying we trust you. We will vote on to approve the operating forecast next time, but we will, and we're not going to question any changes you make to those numbers. So if you internally clarify those numbers, just use those.
I mean, I feel comfortable with that. Laura, does that work with you?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great unless you could even today, right, Jason, confirm those two categories. And then we would know which number we're shooting for on a
Right.
revenue assignment. You know, that would work.
Okay.
Can I ask another question, just in terms of like, there doesn't seem to be any contingency in the budget. Is that the case, that there's no kind of account to cover unanticipated events?
Well, I do think that if you'll remember the discussion last year, that there is over-collected rate money that's sitting there that can either be returned immediately or returned when there's a need. So that's one contingency. Another is that a PCA negative or positive can be added, whenever there's an over-collection or under-collection of money. So that's the mechanism that we would use. We wouldn't want to set aside millions of dollars just in case. Laura, did you have more to add on that?
Yeah, I just want to say, just to clarify that, the PCA really can only be added to cover differentials in power supply costs,
Right,
Uh, not operating costs. So if we had, for some reason, a contingency where we had $3 million more costs that were operating costs, the PCA couldn't be used, for that. But we do have a number of cash funds, including an emergency fund, that can be called upon, right, in cases like that, where it doesn't have to be recovered immediately in rates. That's what they're there for.
Very, very helpful, because to me, the power supply cost is, to me, the greatest uncertainty.
right.
Yeah, well, we had the supply chain issues and starting to ship natural gas to Europe. We had to do a 5-cent PCA to account for the natural gas prices that were fueling most of the generators. So yes, we have a mechanism to deal with that. We've done it in the past.
Good. Well, then let's go to the comment period. And do we have a select board comment or a finance committee comment first? Hearing none, any public comments? Hal Iverson.
Oop, Hal, I think you're muted.
Hal, we can't hear you, Hal.
Oop.
Let's go to Pamela Dritt while Hal figures out if he could figure out his problem. Pamela.
I know we're going to have a whole lot of large infrastructure expenses coming. And as we do more generation of electricity and storage within Concord, can we make sure to start planning for that in terms of having a fund that we gradually raise rates now so that we can fund the incentives to leverage the homeowner investments in distributed grid things that we're going to have, and so that we avoid rate shocks for the large infrastructure things that pay off in the long run massively, so that we can internally fund a lot of these wonderful things that we're doing, like we have in the past. Make a
Well-
fund so that we don't, so that we charge gradually raising rates and still be able to have excess that we make for the big infrastructure projects, so that it isn't a rate shock for things like the middle school
Yeah,
battery.
well, it certainly will be good to avoid rate shock, and we'll take your idea under consideration. Hal,
And one more question, are we making sure to, with the new infra vans that we buy and all, electrify them too?
Warren, can I just?
yeah, please answer that.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
The town does have a fleet electrification policy, so it dictates that we start with electric and then move to, plug-in hybrid and then gasoline and then diesel. So there's always the desire to strive toward electric if it's possible.
Thanks.
Sorry, can I just give Pam one quick comment? I know she has an interest and wasn't on the meeting. The level 3 chargers at Rideout, the NACS cable, the state has changed its policy on that, so we
I
can
heard
actually.
that.
Oh, you
Yay.
did? All right, I want to make sure you did. I thought you'd be excited.
Thank you. I am.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, Hal. We still can't hear you.
You're not muted on Zoom.
It's on your end.
Keep talking just in case something works.
No.
Oh, it says connecting to audio.
Now try.
Sorry,
Mm,
we don't hear you.
No, sorry, we don't hear you. We'll have to take it offline. Thanks very much. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Second,
John,
yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and I vote to adjourn as well.